Good morning, Boon Church. This is English service, March 29th, 2020. So glad and happy to be with you today. In our context, you may notice that I'm not in a church sanctuary, and that perhaps you are like myself, been stuck at home for a little while. Maybe you're clicking in, tuning in from your bedroom or living room or kitchen or basement, front yard, backyard, wherever you are. Welcome. Today our text is Hebrews 4:14 through 16, and I would like to discuss how Jesus answers the problem of evil. How Jesus answers the problem of evil. When we look at the world today, we think to ourselves, there's so much evil out there. There's so much corruption, so much crime, so much wickedness. We go, God, if you're big and you're so real and you're so good, then why not just destroy evil altogether? Why not get rid of it? Why not cancel it out of existence? But sometimes when we pose that question, pose that issue and that concern, it is because we fail to see that the evil outside of us is actually the same evil that comes from inside of us, inside our very hearts. And if God were truly to destroy evil, to get rid of the source of evil, to get to the root of it all, He would have to destroy us. He would have to wipe us away and wipe us out. But He does not. And there is an answer. Through our text today, I hope to show you how Jesus answers the problem of evil. First, by giving us forever second chances. Verse 14, please read with me. Therefore, since we have a great high priest who has ascended into heaven, Jesus the Son of God, let us hold firmly to the faith we profess. I'm a member and the president of the Second Chance Club. I need second chances. I simply make a lot of mistakes. I have regrets that I cannot yet fix. And there are just times when I wish I could take back a word I said, I just want, no, it's not there anymore. Just grabbing a word back that I didn't mean. So second chances hopefully abound for me, as I'm sure they may abound for you too. Now, to see how Jesus gives us forever second chances, we need to do a little comparison between an earthly high priest and Jesus, our great high priest. And it is here we will find the special who and where of where Jesus can represent us as the great high priest. Key word, represent. Representative. Hebrews 5:1 says that every high priest is selected from among the people and is appointed to represent the people in matters related to God, to offer gifts and sacrifices for sins. Priests were specially set apart, wore special clothing, special regulations, special rules, because they and they alone were appointed to be able to offer sins, to offer for sins, sacrifices to cover for the sins of the people. So they stood as intermediates, they stood as intercessors, they stood as mediators between a holy God who chose to dwell amongst a sinful people. Now the high priest, for one day of the year, called the Day of Atonement, was the day where he could enter into the tabernacle where God's presence dwelled, the Holy of Holies where His presence actually manifested itself. And there he could make atonement for himself first, and then on that very special day, for the past year's sins, make atonement for the past year's sins of all the congregation of Israel. Every single person. Now, what is this atonement that I keep talking about? Well, sin incurs a debt. When we sin against God, we must pay a penalty. It is a crime. And crime, we must pay for our crimes in a sense. So we must make a payment or a atonement for sin. And that's what atonement is. Now, even with all the detail, even with all the furnishings and the rules and the regulations and the special clothing and all these rituals that went on, the tabernacle was nonetheless but a shadow of things to come. It's a copy of heavenly things. What does Hebrews 9:24 teach us? For Christ has entered not into holy places made with hands, which are copies of the true things, but into heaven itself, now to appear in the presence of God on our behalf. The focus is the where. The tabernacle was an earthly place, an earthly building, limited by time and space, and it could be worn out from usage, it could even be stolen, it could be burnt down. It was an earthly place. The high priest represent the people here. Now, where is Jesus representing people? Where does Jesus represent us? He represents people in heaven. Not just in the copy, but in what the copy pointed to, the shadow that pointed to the light. Jesus represents us in the very presence of God who fills the heavens. And so the fact of the where makes Jesus' high priest, his great high priest duties far more superior, far more superior than any high priest could do. Second, Jesus, being the Son of God, he can represent people like no other. His title and his status, matchless, unparalleled. He is unique, completely unique, and not the same as we are. And so then, speaking of the length of time, Jesus, the Son of God, being the eternal Son of God, he is forever, which means that he can forever represent us. See, Old Testament high priests, they would ultimately pass away. And so their duties would not be able to be done on a permanent basis. And when we want representation, maybe think of a courtroom and a lawyer. We want representation 100% of the time. Not 50% of the time. He'll be there to defend us, or she'll be there to defend us, to speak on our behalf, to plead our case. 50% of the time would get us into trouble. In the same way, we wouldn't sign up for a plan, insurance that covers us 65% of the time, or an employer who pays us 85% or even 99% of the time. We need 100% assurance, do we not? Jesus can 100% all eternity represent us before God. He is the Son of God, fully man, so he can represent weak human beings, and yet he is fully God, so he can represent forever. Hebrews 7:25 says this, "Therefore he is able to save completely those who come to God through him, because he always lives to intercede for them." What does this mean for us? It means that Jesus will never stop loving, never stop pleading, never stop interceding. Do you see what this means? Some of us here are going, you know what? I just need to find that more permanent, more certain relationship out there, that thing out there that's really going to promise to never let me go, to never forsake me, to never leave me behind, never abandon me. Where else would you look besides Jesus? Where else could you turn to than the one who can eternally represent you, eternally love you, eternally plead your case before God, and eternally intercede for you? This is the kind of love that inspires lyrics like this. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. It chases me down, fights till I'm found, leaves the 99. I couldn't earn it, I don't deserve it, still you gave yourself away. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. It just chases, relentlessly pursues those whom he loves. And so knowing this love, this great, strong, everlasting love, the writer of Hebrews tells to these people, hold firm to the faith that you profess. Don't just hold it loosely, as if there were other options out there, right? Don't keep your options open. Make Jesus your number one option. Hold on to him because he will not let you go. There are people who will let us down. Inevitably, people who will hurt us, people who give us the cold shoulder, people who will stab us in the back. And then, when that happens, they sin against us, right? They do wrong against us. Our love for them grows cold. Our affections for them, they wane. And what once was a burning flame, now a flickering fire. Not so with Jesus. We are repeat offenders, but his love repeats over us. He doesn't downplay the severity of sin. No, he doesn't downplay the consequences of our mistakes, of our wrongdoings against someone else or against him. No, but he doesn't turn his back. He doesn't just stand there and berate us. I can't believe you did that again. He doesn't threaten us. If you don't do it better next time, you know what I'm gonna do. He doesn't remind us of our past. I knew you would never change. You've always been the same. You've always been like that. Why even bother going to church? Why bother going to Bible study, reading the Bible? Why bother praying? You're just the same. If we feel like we've let him down, there are times we do, we find that he's still holding us up. He still hasn't let us go. The overwhelming, never-ending, reckless, matchless, relentless love of God. He forever represents. He forever loves. One author says it like this: the only love that won't disappoint you is the one that can't change, that can't be lost, that is not based on the ups and downs of life or of how well you live. It is something that not even death can take away from you. God's love is the only love like that. So don't turn away from Jesus. He alone can give you those forever second chances. And the right way then to use a second chance is not to take advantage of it. But when we really truly receive that second chance, that second chance at life, that second chance at being forgiven and having the guilt and the shame off of our shoulders, that burden on our back that really prevents us from moving forward, when we are truly forgiven and we've got that second chance, we can go out there then, kind of moving forward to right the wrong and to stop these injustices from being perpetrated by our very hands, by our very actions. Isn't this the power to answer the problem of evil? So Jesus, the Son of God, he's this great, eternal, just so above us, unparalleled and matchless in his title and in his status. He seems so high up above us. And yet, he gets us. For we do not have a high priest, we're in verse 15, who is unable to empathize with our weaknesses, but we have one who has been tempted in every way just as we are, yet he did not sin. The second point, Jesus answers the problem of evil by experiencing it personally. He understands our struggles, and he understands our suffering, right? This is how he empathizes with our weaknesses. First, suffering. Have you ever loathed someone? Or been loathed? Been hated? Like the wrong someone did to you, you just want to return it back to them tenfold, 20-fold. Jesus was hated by the world in John 7:7. He was rejected by his own, John 1:11. Have you felt left out? Jesus was abandoned by his disciples, Mark 14:50. Have you felt that no one gets you? especially family. And sometimes the closer they are, the more it hurts when they misunderstand. And the one who's supposed to know you the most and care for you and love you the best kind of fails at doing that. Jesus was misunderstood and mocked by his own family. Mark 3, 20-21. Have you ever grieved? Have you ever had moments or seasons in life where it's just tough? It's just so tough to do anything. Productivity all-time low, effectiveness all-time low, efficiency all-time low. And life just seems like a burden. Know this, Isaiah 53, Jesus is a man of sorrows, and he's acquainted with grief. Finally, have you lost a precious relationship? On the cross, he was pierced for our transgressions. He was crushed for our iniquities. And like a lamb led to the slaughter, by his death, we guilty are declared innocent. He was forsaken by the Father. He cries out on the cross, Psalm 22, my God, why have you forsaken me? And one writer says it like this, like, what's the big deal, right? What's the big deal about this? The longer, deeper, and more intimate the relationship, the more torturous is any separation. But the Son's relationship with the Father was beginningless and infinitely greater than the most intimate and passionate human relationship. When Jesus was cut off from God, he went into the deepest pit and most powerful furnace beyond all imagining. He experienced the full wrath of the Father, and he did it voluntarily for us. So know this, the God who desires to know you, the God who desires to have a relationship with you, is the suffering sovereign, the servant king, the fully God, fully man, Jesus Christ. No one felt like what he could feel. No one loved like he could love. No greater healer, no greater savior has reached into the pits of hell to rescue a wretch like me. There is no one like him. How else? Christ not only understands our suffering, he understands our struggles, the temptations that we go through in daily life. Here might be a few that you go through as well. One is pride. We generally don't like self-centered people, right? They think the world revolves around them and everything's around them. Everything's either profitable or not profitable, beneficial or not beneficial. Relationships with prideful people can sometimes feel like transactions, like business. Jesus was not. He with his status, with his title and authority and power, he humbled himself and he became a servant. What about the desire to live a comfortable life? Many of us go to school, work hard, to not just have a peripheral goal of an annual vacation, but we want the luxury, we want the lavish lifestyle. Jesus, the Son of God, he says of himself that he's got no place to lay his head, that even animals have homes. How about wealth and fame? We've seen headlines in the news of people who exploit others for their own gain. And we're like, that's disgusting, that's wrong, that's corrupt, that's vile, that's evil. 23 years in prison? How about 46? How about 46 years? How about 123 years? How about 400 years? We want no mercy for those who exploit others and live a life of just pleasing themselves, for themselves, with great amounts of fame or popularity. When Jesus was tempted by the devil in the desert, he rejected the pleasures, the comforts, authority, power, and fame. And he instead chose a life then will be full of suffering and inevitably lead to death. What does this mean? All this talk. It means that we can always come to Jesus. Again, if you're out there today in your living room or in your bedroom or wherever you are listening, and you are thinking there's got to be something else out there that's more sure or more certain, I encourage you to look no further than to Jesus, who will always understand, who will always get you. Don't look any further. Make your only option to be Jesus. And the beautiful thing is, when we receive empathy from Jesus and understand that He gets us, when we understand that someone really understands us all the time, no matter what, we can then understand someone else. When they're going through their season of struggle, their season of pain, their season of grief, we can walk into their darkness and say, I know what Jesus has done for me. I know He is there for me. Can I be there for you too? Can I go through with you what you are going through? Imagine that as an answer to evil. Instead of berating someone and just saying, hey, why don't you get your act together? Why can't you just do better? Stop feeling that way. Stop being so depressed or so gloomy. All right? Stop being so pathetic. And then we drive that person into a place of more powerlessness, more guilt, more shame, maybe even to self-harm or even harming other people. Instead of doing that, we can say, look at what Jesus has done for me. May I be there for you. May I be there for you. Third, Jesus answers the problem of evil by exercising justice and love simultaneously. So the end of verse 15 says, yet he did not sin. We're going to go into it really soon. And then verse 16, let us then approach God's throne of grace with confidence so that we may receive mercy and find grace to help us in our time of need. Old Testament high priests could not get rid of our sin. The animal sacrifices that they made, they showed us that the payment for sin is death. It's very severe. The consequences are far too great. And the animal sacrifices, because they are ultimately inadequate to substitute the life of a precious human being made in the image of God. Animal sacrifices then pointed to the one who would ultimately be sacrificed for us. Fully God, fully man, Jesus Christ. Just as the tabernacle pointed to the heavens above. Second, Old Testament priests, high priests, could not take away sin because they were sinners themselves. They had carried in themselves the very thing they were trying to get rid of. They were contaminated while trying to distribute the cure. We think to ourselves, why can't the high priest just die for the people once and for all? Well, his death wouldn't be adequate. Because again, he carries the same sins he's trying to get rid of in other people. In the same way, none of us can pay the penalty for someone else because we in ourselves carry the crime that they've committed. Only Jesus the high priest can pay and satisfy the payments, the price, because he is perfect. There's some ways that we try to pay God back, aren't there? Maybe if you're a Christian like myself, maybe you'll miss church because you wake up late one day. And so the next week you arrive an hour early. Something silly like that. Or, you did something wrong. You hurt somebody's feelings or something. And so somehow you don't just apologize to the person, but you also donate money to some organization to pay for it. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. Only Jesus can take the penalty, our penalty, because he had no sin. And that's what the end of verse 15 says. This means that he always perfectly obeyed God. Always. If Jesus had sin, right? If Jesus actually had sin, just like every one of us here, his death would be nothing but maybe a nice gesture, maybe an act of heroic sacrifice for other people, but it wouldn't actually change our status before God. That's the key word, status. But because he was truly sinless, his sacrifice counts. His payment counts. It is adequate. It is enough to pay for our sin. And it allows something to happen. And the Bible calls this being justified by faith. And what happens is, when you in faith place your faith in Jesus, you say, God, I trust what Jesus has done for me. What happens is his perfect record, his righteousness gets credited to you as if you lived his perfect life, as if you were perfectly obedient to God. It's not our merit, it's his merit. When he died the death we deserve. At infinite cost, God in Christ purchased us out of condemnation and into freedom. Everybody who places their faith in Jesus has this great, great reward. It's kind of like a paramedic donating her organs to a murderer, one who saved life, giving up their lives to one who took away life. Jesus receives the death penalty, and we receive the Nobel Peace Prize. He's slain like the criminals that we are, the death that we deserve. He's slain for the guilty like us, to make us innocent. This is what it means for his righteousness to be credited to us. It's as if we live this life that he had lived. One more example, maybe appropriate for our times, easier to understand. Remember those zombie movies where there would be this viral outbreak, right? And they go all over searching for some kind of antidote, some kind of vaccine. And they find this one, 9-year-old girl, right? Totally vulnerable, needs like VIP protection and everything, and the army and all that stuff. And they find her. And they find that she was bitten, but she remained human, the same. And so they would find a vaccine, based out of how her body fought off this virus. And in a sense then, everyone who's vaccinated not up to this point, but everyone vaccinated after this point would be sort of like a new humanity who would no longer be under the effects of the virus, who would no longer be under the control or the power of this virus. In the same way, Jesus makes you new. He actually changes your status. You become from sinner to being a sinner who's saved by grace. You become a saint. You become from condemned to pardoned, from being an enemy of God, under wrath, under condemnation, deserving judgment, deserving punishment, to one who is pardoned, not guilty, free, his child. This is the status change that only Jesus can do, because it's not based on my merit, but on his. I couldn't earn it, and I don't deserve it. He still gave his life for me. And thus in verse 16, right, this verse, we have this phrase that I often say even in my own prayers, that God, I can approach you with confidence, and whenever I need you, I can come to you. I find what I need. Because no longer then do we approach the throne room of God as guilty, condemned criminals, defendants afraid to receive their judgments. But no, quite on the contrary, the most opposite that it could be. We come to God because of what Jesus has done. We come to God not as afraid criminals, but confidently as his children. Do you see that status change? And I couldn't earn it. I don't deserve it. He gave himself for me. So now when I approach God, I'm not like, oh, I can't, what did I do? I cannot, oh, he's going to get me. He's going to get me. He's going to say, my son, my daughter. This is what Jesus has done. So now you might be asking, how does this answer the problem of evil? if I have the assurance, the great, great assurance that my sins are truly washed away, and that God himself holds nothing against me. And the reason he holds nothing against me is because Jesus, the Son, took the punishment that I deserve. He took the consequences that were due to me, the death penalty that was due to me. He died that I might live. This is not just a feel-good story. My status has actually been changed. I'm actually now a child of God. I'm actually now not weighed down and defined by my regrets or my mistakes, by the things in the past that I can't fix, that I can't change. If the absolutely perfect one, the absolutely beautiful one, the most majestic one, the one who captivates the whole universe, if he says, I am forgiven, and it's not because I've paid the price, but because the judge was judged for me. Christ, the judge, was judged for me. Then I can only be grateful, can't I? If I know that someone else took what I deserved, the punishment that I deserved, then I have every reason to live my life in response by loving him. How? By exemplifying this selfless, this sacrificial, this costly love. So then what would I do in my daily life? I would love God, and like his word says, love my neighbor as myself. I would seek not my own interest, but seek the interest of others first. This is how Jesus destroys the evil in our hearts without destroying us. This is how we get motivation. It's out of gratitude for what's been done for us. This is not just justice in the expense of love. This is not love in the expense of justice. It's not one at the expense of the other, but in fact it is both simultaneously, love and justice. How? At the cross of Jesus Christ, where he died and he paid the penalty for you, he received the judgment of God in order to show us the love of God. When you wake up in the morning, every morning, and find that this is what's been done for you, this is what's been done for me, this is what's been done for us, how else could we live than in grateful response? To not live a self-centered life, and to freely do the evil that we want, that we excuse ourselves, saying it's okay. But we are freely and powerfully enabled to live a life that loves God, that loves our neighbor, a life of sacrifice, of costly love that puts others before ourselves. How is that for an answer to the problem of evil? In Christ, the punishment that was due unto us was on him. The judgment that was due unto us was on him. He died the death that we deserved. He lived a life that we could never live. He paid the price. And we take his righteousness, his perfection, credited to our account. Now when God sees us, he's not seeing you. He's not seeing you out there right now. You out there with the same kind of regrets that I may have, the same kind of mistakes that I might have made, the same kind of things that we want to stay in the shadows, in the secrets, in the secrets compartments of our hearts that we will never want to unlock. God says, I know all that. I know how imperfect you are, how messed up you are. But even so, I will not want you to pay the price. My Son has paid the price. So would you follow me now that you know my great love? And then would you trust me and obey me and let me lead you? Let me love you like no one else can. So Christians, if you're out there today, would you never ever want to run away from Jesus? He always, always gets you. He always understands you. He's there to love you. And because of him, you can approach God with great confidence. And if you are not a Christian out there today, and this is maybe your first time hearing this church stuff or this Jesus stuff, my prayer is that getting just a small glimpse, 36 minutes now of God's love for you. Would you consider then to be curious, to ask questions, and to consider one day giving your life to him, to let him lead you and to love you like no one else can. This is how Jesus answers the problem of evil. I thank you for giving me this privilege of sharing with you today. Have a blessed rest of the day.